how do you feel about everything that's happening with Iran right now? Giving your roots from it. I'm so happy that China came in and said, "Hey, you guys aren't going to bully them completely like you've been doing before." And as a result, what did Saudi Arabia do? Now Saudi Arabia is no longer selling any using U.S. dollars, for their petrol. The U.S. dollar is done now. We've just lost in the 12 months. We've lost 9% of our purchasing power. So if you had $100,000 last year, you only have $91,000 now, and it's steadily declining. 25 countries have jumped onto the BRICS, apart from those other 5 countries. We've got 39% of our world, of the finances, now no longer being dependent. Only 51% of the world is still using U.S. dollars. And as the dollar crashes, because Trump has a plan, and his plan is, if you weaken the dollar, then you can bring manufacturing jobs back over here. But that doesn't work with the tariffs that are being hit outside the world. Canada, we've just imposed a thing on Canada to where they're not able to use the chip system anymore. They're not able to use U.S. dollars anymore. So what did Canada do? What did Carney do? He set up and said, okay, I'm going to go and work with Beijing. But on top of it, I'm going to ask for the war chest from NATO. I want $12 billion because I've got to deal with an aggressive America. And then on top of it, Canada said, you know what we're going to do? The 12 states that we give electricity to, every tariff you put on us, we're going to put on the electricity that we were sending down to them. And on top of it, we're not going to give you any of our minerals anymore. We're in a tight little bottleneck that something has to go, and our U.S. dollar, the COMEX, I don't know if you follow silver, what's happening with silver.
Skyrocketed, gold, record-breaking numbers.
All of that, and silver's been suppressed, artificially suppressed for the last 50 years. J.P. Morgan just had to pay $920 million in fines for the suppression of the silver market because of the paper contracts. And now we have a different pricing for paper contracts of silver for futures here in comparison to actual silver in Shanghai. There's there used to be an arbitrage. You buy silver here, for whatever amount, even if it's $71 here, and then you go over to China and you sell it, for the $88 that would have marked over there. And well, now that arbitrage, they're not playing with that anymore because there's no silver in the COMEX. And we use over 1.2 million ounces of silver in all of our electronics. And we use 20 grams of it in solar panels, 50 grams of it in every electric vehicle, in every computer component. And there's only 851 million ounces being produced a year. And most of our silver is coming from byproducts from gold mines, from lead, from zinc, from copper mines. We only get about 20% of our silver from actual silver mines. And China is hoarding it. And out of nowhere, J.P. Morgan, who has been fighting against silver all this time, now they got 750 million ounces of silver. And it's necessary for all of our electronics. So silver has the potential now to go up to being worth thousands of dollars. It will become more even with gold. I think it's like 30 to 1 now, or sometimes it's at 50 to 1. Now it's going to get up to about 13 to 1. So, and typically when the precious metals go up, the stocks are going down. But for a minute, they had the stocks and the precious metals going up at the same time.
Well, I think gold was suppressed for a while because the typical triggers of printing money, all that money we printed during COVID didn't cause gold to move as much. So gold eventually caught up. And I think it's needed to be at 5,000 for a while. I think the 5,000 was inevitable. Now the question is, how much higher can it go?
The more the U.S. dollar weakens, because the U.S. bonds, China just sold $864 billion of its U.S. debt. Japan is selling its U.S. debt. Nobody's buying the bonds, so the yield rate is going to change. And our and precious metals is the only thing you can trust now. So
What's
silver.
your position with Bitcoin? Where are you at with
Bitcoin is going to die. I don't mess with it.
You think Bitcoin is going to
Oh,
You touch nothing with crypto?
I don't touch it.
Tell me why you think it's going to
Well, I just got a call from somebody a couple of days ago and said, "Hey, if you got 25 million, you can make 75,000. I just want to put it inside of an account to do some stuff." And this is a friend of mine, and I was like, "Do you realize that Bitcoin is still based on fiat? It's still and because the dollar is decreasing in its value, because the uncertainty of war around." Nobody wants their money in something that can be wiped out with a push of a button somewhere. I've stayed free and clear of it because it's been dropping a great deal. I think it's at $61,000 now.
Yeah, but it went from 18 to 40 to 60 to 125. And it typically goes through the process. If you do a 5-year, if you go to and by the way, I have less than 1% of my portfolio in Bitcoin, so it's not like I'm a pro-Bitcoin guy that's saying this to you. Go to Max, Rob. Go to Max if you look at it. If you look at what the second one looks like as the first one, do you see that?
Yeah.
It looks like a twin.
Yep.
So that means we got, we may be either at the bottom or it could go a little bit lower. But again, patterns change, but we'll see what happened with that. What concerns you the most? You were saying all these things. My challenge is if all these years, these presidents did everything to strengthen China. Nixon opened it up, and China went from being nobody to they were worried because Soviet Union was too powerful and they could catch up. So they gave power to China. They opened it up because they wanted China to beat Russia. Well, then China didn't just beat Russia and passed up and became number 2, and now it could potentially compete with us, right?
Oh,
So the number one creator of commerce for these countries has been us. Why? America's been sold by a lot of presidents to other countries. So finally you got a guy that comes in that's like, yeah, I don't know if I like these deals. All these deals favor more the other countries than us. But to be able to put the deals in place is a very hard thing to do and to be able to pull off. He's trying to do it all of it at the same time. There's a 90% chance it's not going to work.
No. Well,
but the 10%, if it does, it protects you and Americans long term. Do you believe that way or no?
Well, his ideals and approach would have worked 40 years ago when you had the dollar dependency that every other country, if you wanted to trade something, you had to have U.S. dollars. So it kept our economy stable and strong. We could print as much money as we wanted to because we can always borrow money at very low rates because everybody wanted to do business with us. But now that the U.S. dollar has lost, it's turning into the sterling pound. For 100 years, that was the money thing, but now we can't push the things or use the force that we were using 40, 50 years ago because the dollar is no longer necessary in the world. So we have to take a more diplomatic approach to doing things. I appreciated the strength by which he came out and was like, hey, NATO, you got to pay your fair share. Hey, Canada, you've been taking advantage of us for years, with these trade agreements. China, you're doing the same thing. But we don't have the staying power that we had before. It's a global economy now. So when a major portion of that global economy is being blocked up with trade embargoes and tariffs and all of that, when everybody is talking, now China is like, okay, great. Keep playing your game. I'm going to keep the Belt and Initiative going out there. I'm going to keep giving to these countries that you're turning your back on. I'm going to keep giving to them. I'm going to and not ask them to change their constitution. I'm not going to force them into anything. I'm going to keep things as good as possible with them. China's doing the smart move. Because now all of these countries is turning on the U.S. and turning to China. Hey, China, you support us now. Even Greenland, wants to have talks with China. So we have to change our tactics and get back to making friends and being partners on the world stage, and instead of isolation, because the isolation, I love the strength in him, but there's a time for finesse and there's a time for brute force. And what happened in the Straits of Hormuz? Is that right?
Yep.
Here we're about to pounce on Iran because of Israel not wanting to maintain our power there. But what happens? Well, now China sends its little boat, its ships in there. Russia sends their ships in there, and there's a standoff.
What do you think is going to end up happening?
The U.S. knows that we cannot strike Iran without those ships, all of them being wiped out and starting this world war. There's going to have to be a de-escalation of that because Iran is no longer just an isolated country without anyone helping it. Now it has the support of our two biggest rivals. And it has the support of everyone that an enemy of my enemy is my friend. So they're all turning to Russia, like Burkina Faso turned to Russia, to ask for its help. Because why? The colonialists are still trying to move the stuff that they were doing before against Ibrahim Traore, President Traore, who was trying to unify Africa and saying, you know what, you're not going to take my gold and process it in Canada and then take it over and put it in the vaults in France. No, this is the gold that belongs to my people. And they're going to make a stand for their position and their gold. So what does Russia do? Since the U.S. is supporting France in this move, Russia goes and makes alliances with President Ibrahim Traore. Now that the war has just started and pushed off, I look forward to seeing how Russia follows through with supporting that. But I'm like, the African nations are all supposed to gather together, but we are so used to being colonialized, of looking down at the ground and, okay, here comes the Europeans. We've got to, it's like, no, they've been taking advantage of Africa because in order for the rest of the world to remain fluid, they need to be able to buy cheap and raw materials from Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa has to maintain and have to be impoverished. And then they use all of their things of, we're going to give you some money, but that money is only to keep them in that impoverished state and keep regimes in place that's going to allow the continent to continue to be raped. But if any moment Africa stands up and demands a fair place on the stage, then the rest of the world economy is going to completely crash. And France is not allowing that. They tried to get Niger involved, and come in battle. And they tried to get Benin Togo involved to come in. Some of the soldiers in Benin was like, no, I'm not going to attack my brother. But then other soldiers do. So the world is in an unsafe place. What we did in Venezuela.
What'd you think about that? Because that was a pretty surgical.
Yeah, it's very surgical, but
they had. It didn't turn into the chaotic. And his answer was more the Monroe Doctrine. Let's protect the Western Hemisphere. The Monroe Doctrine. Making sure we're good, we're safe. And America became America because we have a history of being an expansionist nation. Where we'll buy Florida for $4 or $5 million. Hey, we'll buy, Texas. We'll buy Louisiana. We'll buy Alaska, we'll fight for California and Arizona. We'll take, and now they're talking about, Cuba, and they're talking about, And by the way, I don't know if you saw that or not, but Panama came out with the backing of U.S. Panama came out and says, hey, China,
you're done.
You're done. That's not a bad thing because if China, I had Christine Oman this week, and I said, now that we know the virus was leaked out of China, right? And they could have done something about it. For many years, they're like, no, you can't say that. It didn't come from China. It came from somewhere else. Well, now we know it came from the Wuhan lab. It's the Wuhan lab. And they could have closed the airports down earlier. You don't think they intentionally did that to leave it open? 7 million people died. The world economy lost $16 trillion. China's not been held accountable yet. You think China's a trusted player?
China didn't work by itself with that. The U.S. was involved with that.
Who was it that was involved from
everybody
the US?
was.
Not everybody. Who was everybody?
I think a lot of the countries that were complicit with it, the ones that immediately were like, okay, we're going to go into this lockdown. We're going to force this vaccination on everyone. That was a coordinated effort. That didn't happen. Hey, I think you should do this to your citizens.
But I think that was also some of the globalists and some of the establishment folks. There's a play right now. It's not the Republican and the Democrat thing.
No.
It's the globalists that want to make the whole thing a one world, a whole new world, a new world order, whatever they're calling it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Terrence Howard. I'm an actor, but in the field of science also. So if you would like to connect with me, you can connect with me on Connect. The QR code is down below, and let's have a great conversation.
If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.